So I'd like to take this opportunity to give a few thank yous. First to Arts Council England and the National Lottery Community Fund. They've funded this festival and we really do appreciate their support. I'm just going to let Tasneema communicate with Sahera. So big thank you to Arts Council England and the National Lottery Community Fund. Also a big thank you to Tasneema, who's going to be our interpreter this evening. And another big thank you to Julia from Global Real-Time Captioning. And they've been providing our live captions throughout this festival. If you need to use the captions and you're not familiar with Zoom, there's a CC for live transcript if you click on the bottom right hand side of your screen, but also there's the streaming link is in the panelists chat. And Emily, could you just check that that stream text link is also in the public chat? If anybody is having difficulty accessing the captions, then please just put us a message in the chat. And of course, feel free to send messages to each other and to us. If you've not used the chat before, it kind of depends on what device you're using, but if you've got a screen in front of you, it's usually on the top left-hand corner under view. Zoom is a little bit confusing. It's got two view options. The one on the right shows you whether you want a gallery or a speaker view, and the one on the top left-hand corner allows you to actually see who else is there and what people are saying. And once you get down to the chat, you've got the option to send messages to everybody or to each other. You can also ask us a question in the Q&A box, which is next to the CC box, usually, but not always. Zoom likes to keep us on our toes on the bottom right-hand corner. And you can raise a hand. I just want to say to people, when we're screen sharing, we can't see the chat. So just to be aware of that, if you need to ask us something urgent or to tell us that it's not working, you still can't use the chat to communicate with us, but we will see it the rest of the time. So having got all of that housekeeping out of the way, I'm just delighted to welcome Sahera Khan.
Hi everyone, really lovely to be here again. And it's good to see you too.
Sahera, we first met, I think, within weeks of getting funding for global real-time captioning to provide live captions for our live streamed work. Sahera was able to access our work and we were able to access Sahera's work. We were thrilled to have Sahera's poetry and other videos on our live streams last year. And we were also thrilled to have her bring her children's play to last year's festival. You can actually see that still within our archive on our website, because all of our festival is recorded and remains online for you to enjoy. Not every performance will be online after next week. In particular, you won't be able to see Hera's digital opera. We ask these questions of everyone. So if you haven't seen it yet, it's really, really worth watching. Catch it on the website now. But most things you will still be able to see, for example, over the holidays, if that's the first time you've got to catch up. We're going to start by just talking to Sahera a little bit about her career. Then we're going to see the new video, and then we're going to have a more general discussion on women's safety and in particular deaf and disabled women's safety in the community in the light of everything that's happened this summer. I'm really pleased that we're able to have what is a more serious evening. Last year we had a really important exhibition about eating disorders, and we had a very interesting evening where we had this very aesthetic exhibition, but we were also able to talk about the issues. And I think tonight, again, we have a great piece of work from Sahera, but we also have the opportunity to talk about the issues in a way that frankly isn't being done anywhere else, or at least we're not being listened to. So I'm delighted that this conversation is going to be recorded tonight. Sahera, how did you first become an actor?
So I first became an actor, okay. When I first created, I was just thinking I was quite anxious. And then when I started writing and then filmmaking, and then I thought I'd try a bit of acting in a workshop. So I've joined workshops and I wanted to see if I was good enough with acting, and I started, and then slowly I just kind of developed from there.
And were you able to access drama
So
courses?
so far it's been 10. So far it's been 10 years.
And did you do any full-time courses? How did you study?
So it wasn't a full-time course, no. It was a part-time course, like once a week. Some days the course were interesting. How I accessed was I asked to provide an interpreter, but when I have had the access to work, I was using the interpreter from access to work to do the course.
Yes, I can see we have at least one young disabled artist in the audience. Do you think it's still very difficult for deaf and disabled people to get into acting?
Yes and no. Obviously, from my experience, um, it's, and obviously from other people, I've heard that, for example, when I go to like a theatre school, there's been issues having access to interpreter. Like, would they provide an interpreter? Some teachers feel, or when they meet a deaf person, like don't know how to act, so they won't offer an interpreter. And then obviously, when with drama school, had always had so they've had aud- audience assessment, oh, auditing. So they had auditing. So it was a bit difficult, yes. If like going to colleges and universities, you can go and they'll provide an access there, but it will be private drama school. So yeah, you need to do a bit of research and find the right course for yourself.
So you've had a great career since. Do you want to tell us some of your highlights?
Yeah. So far, yes, obviously I'm still writing, but not recently I'm doing short play writing. So I've done a lot of research for that. So no words, talk about women and prison. So for ABH,
So
so
no
from
word.
ABH charge. So it's a short, it's a new short play right now. So it's quite interesting, it's exciting, and recently I've created. Well, I haven't created a lot of films yet, but I'm planning to make short films, maybe comedy, and obviously acting. I'm still carrying on with acting. recently had a new film, No Safety for Women, so which the video will be shown. Sometimes I create, sorry, it keeps freezing. So also some performance on my own. So use, so together 2021. So, so together why? So been to one or two festivals
Yeah, I'm
recently.
I'm
Yes,
not
please.
sure why you're having a problem, Tasnima, because although this frame rate's slow, Sahira is absolutely fine on my screen, but I'm going to try and take the problems you're having into account. So Sahira's poem, Why Together, was written by Sahira for last year's poetry anthology. So, again, you can actually find that in the 2020 archive. It's part of our 20 poems for 2020. And what Sahira has done since is make a slightly longer video version, and that has recently been shown at a festival. No Words was the play that Sahira was writing, well, in fact, is still writing. But that's a piece about women and deaf women in particular in the criminal justice system and the barriers that they face. And No Words, No Safety to, well, the project tonight is a sort of a side project from Sahira's original and ongoing project, because she's going to be developing a full length play about deaf women in the criminal justice system, and we will certainly be supporting her funding bid for that. Something else people may remember Sahira doing with Together is last year, at 48 hours' notice and with no funding, we were told by the NHS that Newham had been chosen to pilot the NHS COVID-19 app. And Sahira and I got together because there was absolutely no information at all for anybody who was deaf or disabled. So we created a film called What's At Auntie, which also is cut into some short film, even shorter films as well, that went on to I think they went everywhere actually. And we're delighted that over the summer there was the pingdemic, because we know perfectly well that if they hadn't changed the program and they hadn't changed the name, the app would have bombed completely. And Sahira was just so brilliant, because I was able to send her a script. She was able to create the characters. It's on our website under resources. So it's WhatsApp Auntie. It's really impossible to describe, but I would never have thought you could make a hilarious comedy about the COVID-19 app. And it is genuinely very, very funny indeed. In fact, I think Sahira and I are going to have to write more plays or videos for those characters, because the characters are absolutely brilliant. So Sahira is just really, really multi-talented. And as she said, she's also a filmmaker. And before we move on to see the video, Sahira, I believe we also screened one of your films, not last year at the film festival, but possibly the year before, because I still have the montage on my laptop that I would have screened for the projection at our last in person film festival in 2019. I can't remember if that was called Faith, Faith, but I'm pretty sure it also stars Rose from Strictly.
So that was Faith.
Yeah, so who was your was that Rose your co-star? So Rose, Rose.
No, Judy. It was Judy. I was working with Judy.
Yeah, I know it was a very, very funny film, and about an encounter in a library between two women, and then one turns out to have a boyfriend.
Yes.
So again, I'm pretty sure if you go into our 2019 archive, there's a link to a publicly available version of that film. But now I think, Sahira, would you like to introduce the film that we're going to see this evening?
Sure.
Yeah, so would you like to introduce it, Sahira?
Sorry. So No Safety for Women, I made. Um, so first, I done the script for it. I had a conversation with Jew. So, and we thought it was a good idea. Then I practiced, and I was going through the script, and then I contacted the producer to film it. Name, produce, frame, produce frame. Yep, that was the name. So I started filming. I was obviously um, I haven't worked with people, different people for a long time. I was a bit nervous. And then also the editing, and then obviously using the phone to edit and text. So hopefully it was quite hard work, but obviously watch the video and hopefully you enjoy it. I think obviously hopefully it'll be interesting. Also, it'll be a story about no safety women feels. Also, hopefully shows the important message. Um, Obviously, I'm not like proper details, but just simple words here and there. So hopefully the audience will enjoy it.
Thank you, Sahira. And then we very much welcome everybody's thoughts and any points you want to make. And yes, we'll just take it from there. So, Emily, could you take everybody's spotlights off and I will screen share?
No safety for women. Visual description. My name is Sahera Khan, and this is my sign name. I am deaf and I use British Sign Language. My skin is brown and light, and I am wearing black glasses, a black turban, black top with full sleeve arms. And I have a black wall behind me. COVID-19, NHS crisis, Black Lives Matter, mental health, Disability Artists Limited, school meals, benefits, homeless, lost jobs, isolation, death, domestic violence, communication barriers, no support from the health community, political issues, and many other things. Did you hear or see the news about the woman who went missing in South London? Sadly, her body was found out of London. Do you want to know who? It was Sarah Everard, aged 33 years old, and worked as a marketing executive. She was murdered. Guess by whom? A policeman. Shocked. Why? In this country, how many women go missing? Were found alive or dead or never found? I ask, why harm women? Why? Sahira, a woman, walking by herself during the night. It's dark and quiet. Someone approaches her, and she reacts It often happens to any woman, deaf, disabled, race, religion, age, gender, or background. Is it safe for women to go out during the night? Is it safe for women to go through a quiet area like a park or road? Another woman was murdered in South London. Guess who? It was Sabina Nessa, aged 28, and a teacher at a primary school. Shocked? But was it by a policeman? No. Why? Lots of things have happened in this country since COVID-19. Do you think this matters? Let's talk about Sarah and Sabina. Murdered. The question is, why do men harm women? Why is a story about Sarah important? Is it because she's white? Middle class? Pretty? Good career? Why is this story about Sabina important? Is it because she's South Asian, Muslim, pretty, and a good career? Both were impacted on social media. Why are they important? What about black women and children? The vital story about two black sisters. Their names, Nicole Smallman and Bieber Henry. They went missing and were found, but sadly they were murdered by a man back in 2020. This story was not highlighted on the news or social media. Why? Are they not important? Where is the equality? I rarely see stories about deaf and disabled women, if they were missing or found. Is it important to discuss safety? Should women go out alone or not? Are they responsible for their decision to go out alone? Did you see my short clip? Imagine, anyone can become in that situation. How would it feel for these four women? Don't sign it for yourself because of where you come from or fear. Anybody, please talk openly to the people you trust. It will make a difference and you are not alone. Anybody, please consider reaching out for support. That would be comfortable and safe for women. How to prevent harm to women through security. Allow women freedom of what they want to do. Increase police officers around during night time. Accessible for help and advice.
Thank you, Sahera. And actually, I think I'm going to respond to your message in terms of reaching out to people. But first, Emily has put in the chat extremely powerful film, and I'm sure other people are going to want to say something in a moment too. I was the victim, and I had forgotten about it really for quite a long time until this summer. But when I was just 19, two men tried to snatch me off the street in the middle of the afternoon. And what was particularly awful about it was nobody did anything. And the only thing I could do, because they'd literally rushed down, they were standing on the top of the steps at Barclays Bank They saw me, they were clearly hunting for a woman, rushed down and got either side of me and got one hand pulling my hair back and one with my arm up, and then lifted me and dragged me off towards the car. And all I could do was shout, I do not know these people. These are not my friends. Because I think even now there's this sense that people, young people, if there's a young woman and some men, they're just having fun, they're friends, the woman is not in trouble. And fortunately, the men ultimately panicked and dropped me in the street. But still, nobody did anything. Nobody asked if I was okay. I couldn't find a police officer. I carried on doing my shopping, sobbing my eyes out. Nobody asked me if I was okay. And I went home. And I didn't even think about it again till several years later. But it worries me that so many people, people say, oh, there was no witnesses. But in fact, I think all too often it's just, women, and particularly younger women, things are just dismissed. So that's my sharing. I wondered what you wanted to say next, Sahera, about the making of the film, because it must have been quite an emotional, challenging process, even to start thinking about these issues.
Yes. Sorry, and what was the question again?
Oh, now you're asking somebody with no short-term memory. But I think it must have been very challenging for you, Sahera, to be focused on such difficult, upsetting issues.
Yes. Also, I've heard loads of women and obviously children going missing. I feel worried about my daughter. Also, she's walking home from school, going to school, just worried about that. So obviously, I'm always messaging my daughter to ask if she's arrived to school on time, and obviously when she's leaving to come home. Something that's really important to obviously when I talk to my daughter, if anyone follows you, you have to make sure you have an open discussion with us. And obviously with adults, everyone just feels a bit you can be on your own, but when it's young people, it's quite important. And obviously it's a young girl, so I have a lot of worries about that. And I think also with a video, when people are aware how we want women and children to be safe, how I know it's quite difficult, it's quite emotional, to be honest.
And I think there's so many issues for disabled and deaf women. And I'm really glad that we're starting the conversation today. On Thursday, Julie Newman, our chair, is in the audience, but I believe, Julie, it's the Greater London Authority's first consultation with deaf and disabled people. And I think we need you to ask that question. Where is the strategy for deaf and disabled women's safety? And I don't know if you're able to put anything in the chat, Julie, or if anybody else wants to ask a question. We've also got the Q&A box on the bottom right-hand side of the screen next to the CC box. So you've got that as an alternative to the live chat. But I'd like to hope that tonight is just the start of a conversation and that we are able to link up, because certainly traditionally what I've found is that a lot of women's organisations only really discuss disabled women when they talk about care, and then it's often about the burden of care. They don't see that many disabled women are also carers and also parents, and we need to be included in that discussion. Shamina says the video was amazing, and I think that's absolutely right. Julie says, yes, for sure. I think she means yes, for sure. She's going to take that subject up with the mayor on Thursday. I think that Sahera is making some important points. I'd love to know. You don't have to be deaf or disabled to join in the conversation, by the way, but I would love to know what other women think the issues are and also the solutions, because, you know, we're not victims. And I think that's very, very clear from everybody, you know, but we are constantly victimized. I noticed for the very first time this week, there was an article, I think it was in The Guardian, almost certainly, about the level of harassment that disabled women suffer all of the time. And that's not even seen as violence and abuse, but particularly unwanted touching. And I could so relate to that as a wheelchair user, where you're just constantly being touched, you know, and people touching your hair in particular, I absolutely loathe. Lots of wheelchair users have the experience of somebody grabbing their wheelchair and trying to push them somewhere else, and then being very aggressive when you say, actually, please leave me alone. It's like touching my body. You know, you haven't asked for help, and suddenly they've decided to just sort of push you off somewhere. I've had friends dragged out of their wheelchairs. Margaret says, where do you see your list of women's needs being presented? Who should it be directed to? I think in London it should be directed to Sadiq Khan. You know, he's in charge of our streets, he runs the police budget. More generally, it's very difficult to know. I mean, I've been an expert witness at the Women and Equalities Committee of the government, and it seems to achieve absolutely nothing. The equalities ministers under the current government tend to be not terribly interested in equality. So I think it's actually very, very difficult to say, other than, you know, we as an organisation, and Sahera and myself are both based in East London, so for us, it is Sadiq Khan. Cheryl McClellan says, yes, June, no intervention by passers-by, links into domestic violence to attitudes to women and violence towards women, still bullying, disability, hate crime. Shahima Begum says, how would a deaf person handle a situation like this outside? And so I think that's for you to answer, Sahira. And I think any of us who've got communication needs that are different to other people's, it's just being out in the street is 10 times more difficult.
Sometimes, like, obviously anyone like with the attitude or they're quite rude, or they say, I just ignore them and I just carry on walking. Really, it's rarely happened to me, so I wouldn't know. But if so obviously in the past, sorry, hold on. Okay, yeah, sorry. So in the past, with I've had I was part of a film of hate crime, where I was acting there. The person, the man that was torturing me, I was a Muslim person, terrorizing me. So obviously, there's a film there that I created. So it was quite interesting. It was obviously it was a different experience for me. So obviously, it's quite linked to like real life situation.
I think it's interesting that, Sahira, that you say you don't have much experience of harassment and abuse. And that's because as women, all of us have got experience of harassment and abuse. And yet, I think many men have no experience at all. So there's quite a lot in the chat. Julie says Sahera is right in saying that more discussion needs to be had. I don't know if it's because people feel they don't have the answers on what to do, but by raising the discussion, it helps to stop this being pushed under the carpet and hidden away. And I think that's absolutely right. If there were easy answers to everything, well, the pandemic would be under control for one thing, wouldn't it? So, but on a more practical level, Shahima Begum asks, is there an alarm you can carry? And I'm really pleased you asked this, Shamina. When we started together 2012, I thought in my naivety that it would be simple to get free alarms for, yeah, just the people who were traveling to and from our events, because back in the 20th century, it was easy. And then the police explained to me that those budgets had been cut as the first part of austerity, or possibly even before. There were no free alarms. So then we decided to dip our toe in the water of crowdfunding. We know that people don't really give money to deaf and disabled people, but we thought we'd try. So we asked, we put up a crowdfunding bid to buy some alarms and also those high vis slack bands that they call them, that you put round to the top of your arm to keep people safe. We didn't get a single penny donated. So actually, I think it's difficult. But the alarms that we use as a team, both volunteers and paid workers at Together 2012, I would really recommend, because they clip onto your clothes. And as soon as the alarm's removed, the points contact, and that sets off a shrieking. So, unlike the traditional alarms that you just press down on, by ripping this off your clothes and just throwing it, it's screaming in one place when in theory you've got a little bit more time to get away. So those are the best alarms that I've seen, but I haven't come up with a single organization that provides free personal alarms. So it all comes down to what you can afford, which is disgraceful. Now, Rona Topaz says that she was a victim of hate crime a few weeks ago, and sadly, yes, I'm really sorry to hear that, Rona. It was disability and appearance related. I dread going to work now. Fortunately, the job ends in a couple of weeks. None of us should have to dread going to work because of crimes and violence, and particularly things that are directed against us as hate. And Margaret's saying, that's horrible, Rona. So sorry you had to experience that. Thankfully, the job ends, but that's how it should be. Emily says, what are our thoughts on the proposal that out of uniform undercover police officers should be put in place in locations such as nightclubs or bars as a measure of women's safety? And she continues to say, that she personally disagrees with this proposal because Sarah Everard's killer was a police officer. So how are we going to trust this? And I think sadly I think there were 2,000 complaints reported in the sort of aftermath of this death, that I think were just complaints about sexual harassment and sexual abuse by police in quite a short period of time. So absolutely, but also actually we need them on the streets. It's not the nightclubs. We need them actually, I would suggest, patrolling the streets. Cheryl says, I was badly bullied in the past and still have unwanted remarks thrown at me, sometimes from children. So much needs to be done around education. And Margaret says, yes, she agrees with that completely. I think there's all sorts that needs to happen in education, but it never ceases to shock me that girls are now experiencing sexual violence at school on a level that was just unheard of 40 years ago. We sort of grew up, my generation, I'm nearly 60, we grew up in the 60s and 70s believing in progress, believing that everything kept getting better. And what girls have to put up with in school today is just unbelievable. But I think there's also an issue I say as the godmother of a young black man, there is an issue sometimes with girls as well. And I think it's just, there is also issues around school behaviour, because there are episodes where the girls are just grabbing the boys between their legs and the boys can't react. So there is also a kind of level of sexual harassment, a different level, but nonetheless a level of sexual harassment against young men in school that I think also needs to be tackled. And again, it would have been unthinkable, you know, people might have gone to school with knives and chains, but they certainly weren't grabbing people between the legs. So the idea that things are getting better, I think we really have to challenge. Rona says she was shocked by how poorly behaved police actually are. It's very dispiriting. Well, we mustn't be dispirited. We need to come out as we are this evening and say, no, we're not having it any longer. And we're certainly not going to be silent. We're going to be as visible as the other women, whether people like it or not. Julie says one of the problems we have is that reporting violence, assault, whether it's sexual or domestic, is so difficult. We need to make sure the police open up discussions with us and look at Home Office funding. And Emily says she completely agrees. I think there's a huge issue. Lots of deaf and disabled women have discovered for themselves, we've seen friends where nobody even takes a statement when it's reported to the police, or it's written down and it's described as an incident rather than a crime. It's certainly not described as a hate crime. And then disabled women are seen as unreliable witnesses, particularly women who've got mental health diagnoses, and the cases are never taken to court. So we had a friend who was attacked by a neighbour. It was very, very clear. Everybody knew exactly who'd done it. And no arrest was ever made. No crime was ever reported. Again, it was just seen as an incident because she was seen as an unreliable witness. So I'm just checking the chat again. I mean, I would be interested to know, Julie, from your days as chair of the UK Disabled People's Council, when you did quite a lot with the Home Office, Department for Justice, what you think. Yes, I mean, are there organisations who should take this forward? Should we be coming together as deaf and disabled women and lobbying, for example, Inclusion London? What do you think would work best? And in the meantime, nobody's using the Q&A box, which I have to say I never do either when I go to other people's webinars. But just to remind you, it is there and it will pop straight up in front of us as opposed to scrolling through the chat. And Glory, who is a man, we don't just have women here. Glory says he completely agrees with all of this. Thank you, Glory. I think it's very unhelpful, actually, when we have discussions and it's been very much about everything is good, women are good and men are bad. Life is a lot more complicated than that. Inclusion London should take this up, says Rona, and organisations can work together. And Margaret says, dreadful stories, albeit not murdered, as portrayed in Sahera's piece. Sahera, what would you like to say? I keep talking.
Oh, yeah, it's quite interesting. Obviously, just like a lot of messages on the chat. It's quite interesting. I didn't know a lot of people that thought it's quite important to share the information. Obviously, recently, a young woman, a student, and obviously with sorry, I'm just going back. So it's quite interesting. Sort of from the audience and obviously their experience and obviously deaf and disabled experience. Wow, it's quite wow. And obviously showing it to council. And just recently on the news, there was news about a young woman, a student, a university student. So she went to a nightclub and a man drugged her, and obviously she fell asleep, and then they raped her. And also I read that and I was just a bit scared. So I think we should just encourage to everyone to wear the high vis or a jacket, a thick jacket, to stop being injected with drugs. Because obviously, like, you know, why do you want to, like, with men, why do you want to hurt women? I just don't understand that. Obviously something that I just read recently, and I just don't understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, isn't it, that we have politicians saying women shouldn't be going out, but we don't have anybody giving us practical advice. And actually, it is practical to be visible. It is practical to have a good thick jacket on, particularly when you're going out. You know, it is practical maybe to take a pair of trainers with you if you've got, you know, if you're going to wear sort of silly heels in the club and you've got to go to the bus stop. But we shouldn't be trapped at home. I mean, I say this having not left my house since March 2020. I'm prepared for COVID to keep me at home, but I'm not prepared for men to keep me at home. So there's Julie Newman in the chat is saying there aren't as many organisations as there used to be. Ain't that true? I think to engage with Inclusion London would be good. The Home Office did have money to apply for, but I don't know what the current situation is. There are a few people around still who carry experience about hate crime research, I think meaning about disabled people, but nobody is discussing it publicly at the moment. And I think that's true, but we are now. Rona is saying, could the interpreter speak slower, please? And I will
Sorry.
try to do the same, Rona.
Sorry.
And if anybody wants to access the live captions, they are being created by a real person. They're not Zoom live captions. We have Julia from Global Real-Time Captioning. The CC box, which should be at the bottom right hand of your screen, but maybe in all sorts of places, depending on your device, will bring you up the live captions from Julia Jacobi at Global Real-Time Captioning. And Rona's just saying, thanks, Tasnima. I think I'd love to hear from some people in the audience who haven't contributed anything. It doesn't matter what it is, and there's no such thing as a silly question, and certainly there's no such thing as an unimportant point. And any tips you've got, experiences, you know, if we've got young women, you know, what are you doing to protect yourself when you're traveling to college or you're going around college? I think the more we can share, the better. What other tips do you give your daughter, Sahera?
So what advice I give to my daughter? So it's really important when you're walking. So don't walk around in quiet areas like through the park, and don't be on your own. Walk in an open place. Make sure you're quite confident, not scared when you're walking down. And I think that's quite important. Also just learn to go to self-defense classes. I'm trying to encourage her to go to self-defense classes. So obviously, hopefully that will help. And always, obviously, my daughter and my husband, we always drop my daughter off when we need to, and we always ask her as well. So I mean, there's no problems there because obviously and then some people think, oh, because we're Muslim we don't allow the girls to go out on their own, but really it's just the area and the safety for women. So obviously dropping her off is not that hard, but my daughter, she obviously, as she's getting older, she wants to be quite independent. And also on the news with everything that's going on to women, and obviously like things that's happening to women by men, so we have a bit of worry over that. And obviously with corona, so yeah, we're not confident at the moment, but yeah, we're getting there. And obviously I don't know, do the audience feel the same way?
Yeah, we've got one from Oh, sorry, I've just lost it again. So, yes, Shahima says that's amazing advice to your daughter, Sahira. Self-defense class is a really good idea. And Nat says self-defense indeed. Rona is still finding Tasmina a little hard to follow. I think it's because, unfortunately, Tasnima's connection isn't working very well, but we'll all try to slow down. Sorry about
Sorry.
Rona. So Rona said, you
Sorry,
just,
Drew, can you hear me properly?
yes,
Okay, I'll slow down. Sorry.
that's okay. Could you just repeat what Sahira had said for Rona?
So, Sahira was just saying, she, her and her husband, they encourage their daughter to attend self-defense classes, and obviously, a lot of the times they both drop her off to school and pick her up. But a lot of people might think that because they're Muslims, oh, they need to be with their daughter, but that's not true. It's just about obviously being, it's just all about the safety of the women in the area. We just think it's really important for us to obviously keep an eye on our daughter and make sure she's getting to school safely and coming home safely. That's all.
Yeah, so Nat says the other thing about self defense is it gives self confidence as well. Um, Somebody saying I carry a personal alarm. Reassurance is all. It's a pull-out peg on. It's in my pocket. It helps me if I'm over anxious or in a place I don't know well. Yeah, I mean, I think alarms are really important. It's just that they're very difficult to get hold of, and you have to pay for them, which seems all wrong to me. And if the mayor wanted to make a gesture, we would already have lots of free armbands and lots of free alarms. Rona says that she thought you'd mentioned her name, Tasmina, as part of the translation, but were you hearing things? I think you might have been hearing things, Rona, because although my memory is not incredibly reliable, I think I would have noticed if Sahira had mentioned you.
Oh, no, sorry.
So let me just skid back through the chat. I mean, when we were doing back in the other universe, when we used to run our dance club in person, I used to spend quite a lot of time just talking to people about how they were standing and giving tips from my own background in the days, well, I say in the days when I used to study Tai Chi, thanks to the joys of Zoom, I'm studying Tai Chi again, although mostly sitting down. But just where people, that whole concept of not being able to be pushed over, there are some useful techniques, but should we have to put up with this? No, we should not have to work out what we're wearing, what we're putting on our feet, what we're carrying in our pockets. However, like I say, it is a dangerous world, and it isn't just men in the same way that not all men are dangerous. If only life was actually that straightforward, we could just, as the old feminist postcard said, we could just send them to the moon and life would be fine again. So Cheryl is saying, I think the film you have made should go mainstream. It needs to be out there. Many women would identify. Many of us feel scared. I would not go into some places at night, and that can't be right. As a disabled woman, I wouldn't be able to protect myself. Yeah, I mean, in the days when I was going out and about, the abuse really started with the taxi drivers. And there's an awful lot I used to put up with in terms of daily abuse and harassment that I've really thought twice about since I've been stuck at home. Jabir is saying everyone should feel safe wherever they go, no matter what time of day it is and no matter where they are. Absolutely. I mean, Nat is saying sometimes
Yes,
people are fearful.
sorry. Sahira was just saying, yes, that is quite difficult. You don't know what time of the day or night things will happen. Like you just never know.
Yes, I mean, like I say, when people tried to
So,
kidnap
and
me,
obviously,
Oh, sorry.
obviously the area, so the area that you live in, and it was the it could be difficult, just the situation as well.
Yes, and yeah, I think it's worth saying that when I was the victim of an attempted abduction, it was 3:30 in the afternoon in the middle of the city centre, and the guys were standing on the top of the steps outside Barclays Bank. This is not about women going into kind of dodgy areas late at night and being stupid. You know, the reality is these dangers are out there all of the time. It's not about whether we choose to go out at night or not. It can be whether we choose to get into a taxi, whether we've reported a crime and are later harassed by the police officer, whether the police officers are part of that crime. But it has to stop. And I absolutely agree your film should go out. Well, we will certainly be making it as mainstream as we can. But Sahera, we just have a few minutes left. Would you tell us about what you're doing with this project, but also your project about deaf women in the criminal justice system, and what you hope to, how you hope to develop them as longer plays?
Okay. So no words really is quite difficult because I have to do research and find real facts, because I don't have a lot of experience myself. So I ask people of their experiences, um, and obviously and any conversations that I've had with people with prison. So it's not easy. It's quite difficult. I hope we could develop more of no words, and I can carry that on.
Brilliant. And what about this project? Because they're two linked projects, really. Now you're doing one about deaf women in the criminal justice system, and one about women's safety. And we'll certainly be supporting any grant funding applications you're making for both of those. But they are long-term projects, aren't they? They're big projects, and you do so much. We were just saying before we actually started the webinar officially, you've done a music video with Dua Lipa.
Oh, so it was just a small role that I was in.
Just a
Just a
small
small
role.
one.
Oh. Just a small role.
Just a small one.
I think we all know what Sahera's small roles look like by now. You're an absolute powerhouse. You haven't even officially come back from maternity leave. So I think that tells us everything we need to know. But we've just got 1 minute left. So apart from a huge thank you to Sahera, I'd also like to thank Tasnima, who's interpreting for us for the first time tonight. Welcome, Tasnima. We hope to see you again. And also thank you to Julia Jacoby from Global Real-Time Captioning, who are captioning all of our events for this festival. So thanks also to Arts Council England and the National Lottery Community Fund for our funding. What we will be doing is editing this recording. Please let me know if you would prefer anything to be taken out, but I think this is an opportunity for all of us to just come out a little bit and say, enough is enough. And actually, we also need to be part of the conversation, whether we're deaf, oral, or whatever language we speak. There's nothing about us without us, and there's nothing about women without deaf and disabled women. We'll also be publishing the links on the programme page on our website. If you've come directly from Eventbrite, that is www.together2012.org.uk. We'll pop in some links to some of Sahera's other work. And then I think on Thursday, we will post a little report back from Julie to see what was said at the meeting with the GLA on Thursday. But I think, to my mind, the sort of key demand with all this conversation about visibility and about alarms is I'm going to contact various groups and say this is what we should be campaigning for. We need free alarms, we need free high-vis bands, and that is just the first tiny step. So in the meantime, thank you so much, Sahera, as always. Thank all of you for listening and for your contributions. I wish you a very good night and hope to see you again later in the festival.
Thank you. Thank you.